The Beacon Point Lighthouse didn't just go dark, it shattered a 117-year silence. By dawn, keeper Elias Voss was gone. Not a trace, just a mug of coffee still steaming, a journal filled with frantic warnings about ships with tattered sails in empty waters, and a phrase clawed into the lighthouse lens, so deep the glass still weeps rust. They're waiting for me to join them. But here's what chills me. The town erased him. Photos torn. Records burned. Even the sea went quiet that night. Why? Because whatever took Elias, it's still here, listening, and it hates the light. On October 12, 1987, at precisely 2:17 a.m., the Beacon Point Lighthouse, a sentinel that had guided ships through New England's deadliest storms for over a century, blinked out. Not a flicker, not a malfunction, a full, deliberate shutdown. By sunrise, its keeper, Elias Voss, was gone. Vanished. No signs of a struggle. No goodbye. Just a half-finished mug of coffee, ice-cold on his desk, and a message. A phrase carved so violently into the lighthouse lens that investigators found glass shards scattered like tears at the base of the tower. They needed the light more than I did. But here's what chills me. Elias wasn't some rookie. He'd kept that lighthouse burning through hurricanes, blizzards, even the '38 hurricane that drowned entire towns. His logs? Meticulous. Too meticulous. Right up until the final week. That's when the entries changed. Scribbled notes about fog moving against the wind, radio static where there should have been calm seas. And the last thing he ever wrote, at 1:53 a.m. on the night he disappeared, I see their sails. Problem is, there were no ships on the radar that night. No distress calls. Not even a breeze. Just the lighthouse, the rocks, and Elias. Or what was left of him. Because here's the kicker. The Coast Guard found his raincoat neatly hung by the door. His boots laced tight, tucked under his bed. But Elias? Gone. No fingerprints on the lamp controls. No footprints on the tower stairs. Just that single, unnerving message etched into glass. And the town? They didn't mourn. They didn't search. They erased him. Census records? Redacted. Family photos? All torn, save for one blurry snapshot from 1985 where Elias's face is scratched out. Even the local paper never ran an obituary. It's like Beacon Point decided that if they buried his memory, they'd bury the truth with it. But the sea remembers. Sailors still talk about that night. How the waves went unnaturally still. How the fog swallowed the lighthouse whole. And how, if you drift too close to Beacon Point after midnight, you can hear it, the faint, ghostly grind of that lighthouse lens still turning. Still searching. As if Elias is out there somewhere, trapped in the dark, trying to send one last signal. So I'll ask you this. What happens when a man who devoted his life to light becomes the thing that lurks in it? Elias Voss didn't just live in the Beacon Point Lighthouse. He became it. For 23 years, his life moved with the precision of the clockwork gears he wound every night. 6:03 a.m., log the weather. 7:15 a.m., polish the lens. Noon, check the tide charts. 8:47 p.m., wind the mechanism until the springs hissed. And every night, without fail, he'd climb the 127 steps to the lantern room, adjust the flame, and watch the light carve a path through the dark. But isolation isn't just loneliness, it's a slow unraveling of reality. The Coast Guard logs prove it. For decades, Elias's entries read like poetry. October 5th, 1982, northeast wind. 12 knots. No vessels sighted. March 18th, 1986, frost on the lens. Icebergs drifting south. But on October 5th, 1987, exactly 1 week before he vanished, the tone shifts. 3:22 a.m., storm surge. Impossible. Radar shows calm seas. The next day, voices in the fog. Not English. Not French. Sounds older. By October 10th, his handwriting fractures. Words bleed through the page. They're mimicking the foghorn. Same sequence. 3 long, 2 short. But the horn's been broken since Tuesday. And then on October 11th, the final entry before his disappearance. I counted 27 shadowed figures on the rocks tonight. They don't move. Don't blink. Just watch. I think they're waiting for me to sleep. Here's the catch. The Coast Guard dismissed it. Isolation psychosis, they said. A man out of his mind. But they never explained the other logs. The ones they tried to bury. Like the radio transmission from a passing cargo ship on October 9th. Beacon Point, confirm you're running a test? We're seeing your light flash Morse code. Leave now. Or the weather station data showing a 30-degree temperature drop inside the lighthouse that night. while the rest of the coast basked in unseasonable warmth. Elias wasn't hallucinating. He was documenting, because the lighthouse wasn't just a job. It was his confession. In the margins of his logs, investigators found sketches, twisted masts, sails torn like cobwebs, and a figure standing at the edge of the light. A silhouette with no face, but arms outstretched as if beckoning. And tucked under his mattress? A 1985 pocket calendar, every date crossed out, except October 12th, circled in red, labeled Day of Reckoning. But the most chilling detail? The clockwork mechanism. When they inspected it after his disappearance, the gears were pristine. No rust. No wear. As if time itself had stopped grinding in that lighthouse. The moment Elias Voss stepped into the dark. You see, routines make us feel safe. But what happens when the routine becomes a ritual? And the ritual becomes a door. October 12th, 1987, 2:17 a.m. The beacon light didn't just flicker. It sputtered, as if something had choked its flame. A passing trawler radioed the Coast Guard. Beacon Point's gone dark. Not a storm in the sky. Get someone out there. But by the time investigators arrived, the only trace of Elias Voss was his pair of weathered boots, laces perfectly tied, sitting at the foot of the spiral staircase, as if he'd stripped them off deliberately, and ascended barefoot into the shadows. Let me paint the scene for you. The lighthouse door was unlocked. No forced entry. No fingerprints on the lamp's shut-off lever. Just a smudge of grease, still warm. The wick, recently trimmed. The fuel tank, full. And the clockwork mechanism? Still ticking, its gears gleaming like they'd been polished moments before. But Elias? Gone. Vanished mid-ritual. Here's what they found on those 127 steps. Saltwater puddles, but no rain that night. Drag marks on the railing, too faint to be human. And halfway up, a single thread of fabric snagged on a rusted nail. A shred of Elias's uniform shirt. Lab tests later revealed something off. The fibers were frayed, brittle, as if aged decades in a single night. But the real horror lies in what they didn't find. No blood, no signs of a struggle. Just Elias's boots, his half-drunk coffee, and the logbook left open to a page scribbled with coordinates. Coordinates that, when mapped, pointed to a stretch of open ocean 12 miles offshore. A place sailors call the blind zone, where compasses spin wildly and sonar reads nothing but void. And then there's the radio. At 2:05 a.m., 12 minutes before the light died, a garbled transmission was sent from the lighthouse to an unknown frequency. Engineers managed to clean up the audio. It's just 3 seconds of Elias's voice, strained, whispering, "I have to, it's the only way to." And then, clear as day, another voice cuts in, deep, wet, and guttural, uttering a single word. Closer. The Coast Guard dismissed it as interference. But a retired signal officer came forward in 1998, claiming the voice's frequency didn't match any known language. It wasn't human, he said, and it wasn't static. It was echoing, like the sound was bouncing back from somewhere far. So let me ask you, what did Elias see at the top of those stairs? A way out, a way in, or something that had been waiting in the blind spots of that spinning light for a century, patient and hungry, until the keeper's resolve finally snapped. Because here's the truth they buried. Lighthouses don't just warn ships about rocks. They warn us about what lies beyond the rocks. And on that night, Elias Voss didn't fail his duty. He completed it. When Elias Voss disappeared, the people of Beacon Point didn't panic. They didn't grieve. They closed ranks. The police? Met with locked doors. Investigators? Shut down with cold stares. Even the local priest refused to speak, blessing himself when Elias's name was mentioned. But secrets have a way of rotting through walls. And in Beacon Point, the rot runs deep. Let's start with Martha's Diner. The greasy spoon where Elias ate every Thursday, meatloaf, black coffee, no dessert. The owner, Martha Cole, was the first to snap when pressed. "He's with the ones who hate the light," she hissed, slamming a coffee pot so hard it cracked. When asked who they were, she laughed, a jagged, humorless sound, and said, "You think the sea's empty. You think the fog's just fog." Then she shut the diner early, something she hadn't done since the '78 blizzard. But Martha wasn't the only one holding secrets. Down at the docks, old Finn McCready, a fisherman who'd worked these waters for 60 years, took a long drag from his pipe and muttered, "Ships with no crew. Sails stitched from fog. Seen him since I was a boy. They don't cast shadows. Don't leave wakes. But they're hungry. And that lighthouse." He trailed off, refusing to finish. 3 days later, Finn's boat washed ashore empty. His family claimed he retired to Florida, but there's no record of him ever leaving Beacon Point. Then there's the town archive, a dusty room in the basement of the library. When investigators requested photos of Elias for the missing persons case, the librarian, a Mrs. Hargrove, handed them a folder. Inside, nothing but blank pages. Every photo of Elias prior to 1987 had been torn out. School yearbooks, town parades, even the 1986 Beacon Point's finest calendar. November's page, featuring Elias, was ripped clean. But here's what they missed: a class photo from 1965. Elias, age 10, standing in the back row. His face is scratched out with a pen, but his shadow, it's gone too. The deeper you dig, the stranger it gets. The local paper never printed a single article about Elias's disappearance. The town council skipped their November meeting, the first time in 43 years. And the church. Father Callahan scrubbed Elias's name from the baptismal registry. When pressed, he quoted scripture. "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it." Then he added, voice trembling, "But what if the darkness followed the light home?" But the most damning evidence came from the radio tower. On the night Elias vanished, a local teen named Robbie Taggart was illegally broadcasting pirate radio from the hills. At 2:22 a.m., his signal picked up a transmission, not from the lighthouse, but from somewhere else. A voice, warped and watery, repeating, "He belongs to the gate now." Robbie played it for his friends, joking about ghost DJs. But by morning, the tape was erased. And Robbie, he joined the Navy 2 weeks later. Never returned. So why the silence? Why the cover-up? Maybe they're afraid of what Elias discovered. Or worse, afraid of what followed him back. Because since 1987, Beacon Point's had incidents. 1989, a crew repairing the lighthouse fled after tools went missing. They claimed someone whispered their names in the fog. 1998, a historian researching Elias vanished mid-interview. His last note, "They're in the walls." 2015, a storm knocked out the town's power. Every light died, except the Beacon Point lighthouse. It burned for 3 hours. No fuel in the tank. And then there's the graffiti. Sometime in the 90s, someone spray-painted the side of the post office. They needed the light. The town painted over it by dawn. But on foggy mornings, the words bleed through the paint. Faint. Relentless. Here's what I think. Beacon Point made a choice. Erase Elias, and maybe the thing that took him would forget they existed. Bury the truth, and maybe the truth wouldn't bury them. But the sea doesn't forget. The fog doesn't forgive. And whatever waits beyond the light, it's patient. So ask yourself, would you risk your life to expose a secret? Or would you do what Beacon Point did? Board up the windows, lock the doors, and pray the light never dies. Let's get one thing straight. Disappearances don't haunt us because they're mysterious. They haunt us because we need answers. And with Elias Voss, the theories split into two worlds, the one we see and the one hiding in the fog. First, the rational explanation. The Coast Guard's official report blames isolation psychosis. They say decades alone eroded Elias's mind, that he imagined the storms, the voices, the ships, that in a moment of delusion he shut off the light, wandered into the sea, and let the currents bury him. It's clean, it's simple, and it's wrong, because psychosis doesn't explain the mechanics. The lamp was manually turned off, but Elias's fingerprints weren't on the lever. The boots left behind, no sand, no salt, as if he vanished mid-step. And what about the journal? Pages filled with coordinates, star charts, and a sketch of a doorframe etched into the lighthouse wall. A doorframe that doesn't exist. The rational theory crumbles fast. Now, let's wade into deeper waters. Sailors have whispered about fog dwellers for centuries. Entities born from drowned crews, cursed to wander the mist. They say these beings hate lighthouses. The light burns them, traps them. But every few decades, when the fog grows too thick, they strike a deal. Take the keeper, spare the town. Old Finn McCready swore he saw them as a boy. Tall, he said. Skin like wet sails. They don't walk, they unroll. In 1923, a keeper named Henry Morse vanished from the same lighthouse. His last log entry, "They're offering me a way out." Locals burned his records. Sound familiar? But the fog dwellers aren't the only legends here. There's the Thin Captain, a phantom shipmaster said to stalk these coasts. Survivors of a 1942 shipwreck claimed he boarded their lifeboat, dripping with algae, and asked, "Is the light still kept?" When they said yes, he smiled with needle teeth and said, "Good, we'll wait." Then there's the Tide Child, Fishermen tell stories of a boy made of barnacles and driftwood who appears on moonless nights. He points to the lighthouse and whispers, "They're almost full." No one knows what they are. But after Elias vanished, a crewman on a cargo ship reported seeing a glowing boy standing on the rocks near Beacon Point. When they circled back, he was gone. All that remained was a puddle of brine and a child's handprint seared into the stone. But let's talk about the darkest theory. The one that doesn't just explain Elias's disappearance, it condemns him. Some believe Elias didn't vanish. He switched. That the lighthouse isn't just a beacon for ships, but a gateway. And that night, when the light died, Elias crossed over. To where? A parallel shore. A realm where the fog never lifts, the ships never stop sinking, and the lighthouse is always hungry. Think I'm mad? Consider this. In 2019, a team of paranormal investigators snuck into Beacon Point. They brought EMF meters, thermal cameras, the works. At 2:17 a.m., the exact time Elias vanished, their devices spiked. The thermal camera captured a heat signature on the stairs ascending. But when they checked, the stairs were empty. Then their recorder picked up a voice. Not a EVP ghost whisper, a clear, exhausted voice saying, "I can't keep it burning much longer." The kicker? When they analyzed the voice, it matched Elias's age-progressed profile. Or take the 2003 incident. A crew filming a documentary about shipwrecks drifted too close to Beacon Point. Their engine failed. As fog rolled in, they swear the lighthouse lit up, bright white blinding. When the fog cleared, their fuel tank was full. But their captain's journal had a new entry in handwriting none of them recognized. "Tell them I'm sorry." So where does that leave us? Let's lay it all out. Theory 1. The broken man Elias cracked. He hallucinated threats, sabotaged the light, and walked into the sea. But why no body? Why the erased records? And why, decades later, do his logs still match tidal patterns he couldn't have predicted? Theory 2. The bargain the fog dwellers took him as payment. A keeper for a century of silence. But if that's true, why does the lighthouse still attract vanishings? Why does the fog feel alive? Theory 3. The keeper's curse Elias is still out there, trapped in a realm that mirrors ours, tending a lighthouse whose light holds back something worse. Maybe he's a prisoner, maybe he's a guardian, or maybe he's become something else, a creature of the fog, endlessly winding the gears, praying someone hears his warnings. Here's what keeps me up at night. In 1987, the same year Elias vanished, a dozen other lighthouse keepers worldwide disappeared. Norway, Chile, Japan, all remote, all without explanation. And all their final logs included the same phrase. They needed the light. Coincidence? Or proof that whatever took Elias wasn't just hungry, it was hunting? So I'll ask you, when you see a lighthouse, do you see salvation? Or a sentinel standing guard against things we're not meant? To name? Maybe both. Or maybe the light isn't for us at all. Maybe it's for whatever's on the other side, watching, waiting, counting the days until we dare to ask, what happens when the last keeper leaves their post? For 32 years, the Beacon Point Lighthouse stood abandoned. Windows boarded, doors chained, a relic frozen in time, until October 12, 2019, exactly 32 years to the day since Elias Voss vanished, when an urban explorer named Jenna Cole ignored the no trespassing signs and stepped inside. What she found there didn't just rewrite the mystery, it haunted it. Jenna wasn't a thrill seeker. She was a history student researching coastal legends. Her thesis? How communities erase trauma through silence. Beacon Point was her case study. But when she pried open the lighthouse door, she wasn't prepared for the cold. Not the chill of neglect, a sharp, alive cold that clung to her skin. The first thing she noticed? The smell. Not mildew or rot. Salt water and ozone, like the air after a storm. Her flashlight flickered as she climbed the stairs, the beam catching swirls of dust that moved against the draft. On the walls, names had been carved by vandals over the years. Tyler plus Amy. Ghosts suck. But halfway up, the graffiti stopped. That's when she saw them. Tally marks. Hundreds of them, etched into the wall in jagged, frantic lines. Each cluster labeled with a date. October 12th, 88. October 12th, 97. October 12th, 16. Every October 12th, the anniversary of Elias's disappearance, for over 3 decades. But here's what made Jenna's hands shake. The marks weren't old. The wood around them was splintered and pale, as if carved days ago. And the most recent cluster? October 12th, 19. Dated that morning. Jenna snapped photos, her breath fogging in the beam of her light. Then, near the top of the stairs, she spotted something in the dust. A single word scratched into the floorboards. Almost. The letters were uneven, clawed in desperation. Underneath it, a handprint, too large to be Elias's, stained with something dark and flaking. When Jenna touched it, the residue crumbled like ash. But the real horror came later. 3 days after Jenna's visit, a local journalist named Marco Rivera tracked her down. He'd heard rumors of her discovery and wanted to see the evidence. But when they returned to the lighthouse, the chains were back. The door, painted fresh. And inside, the tally marks were gone. Not sanded, not painted over. Erased, as if the wood had healed itself. Only the oldest vandal carvings remained. The word almost nowhere to be found. But in the corner of the lantern room, Marco found a pile of ash still warm to the touch. And beside it, a rusted pocket knife, stamped with initials EV. The police dismissed it as a prank. But Jenna and Marco kept digging. They uncovered a pattern. Every 5 to 7 years, someone tried to expose the lighthouse's secrets. 1992, a photographer broke in, claiming he'd captured shadow figures on film. The photos vanished from his studio. 2001, a teen posted a video online of ghostly writing appearing on the lighthouse walls. The video corrupted minutes later. 2012, a paranormal investigator published a book linking Elias to other keeper vanishings. He died in a hit and run a week later. Then there's the ash. Jenna sent a sample to a lab. The results? Burnt seaweed and human skin cells. But the DNA was degraded, impossible to trace. The most chilling detail, though, came from Marco. While researching in the town archives, he found a 1988 police report, one that hadn't been scrubbed. 2 hikers claimed they'd seen a man in a tattered coat standing atop the lighthouse on October 12, 1988. They swore he was glowing. When police arrived, they found no one. Just 31 tally marks carved into the door. Wait, 31? If Elias vanished in 1987 and the tally started in 1988, that means someone or something has been marking each year since he disappeared. But who? And why? Jenna's theory? The tallies aren't counting years. They're counting attempts. Each mark representing a failed try to what? Escape? Communicate? The word almost suggests he was close. Close to freedom? Close to being caught. But here's where logic snaps. In 2020, Jenna and Marco interviewed a retired nurse, Helen Briggs, who worked at Beacon Point's clinic in 1987. Helen had never spoken publicly, until now. 2 days after Elias vanished, she said, a man stumbled into the clinic. Soaked to the bone. No ID. He kept muttering, "The door won't stay shut." When I asked his name, he said, "They won't let me say it." Then he collapsed. No heartbeat. No pulse. But when the doctor examined him, his clothes were dry. Bone dry. And his pockets? Filled with sand that glowed in the dark. The man vanished from the clinic that night. Security footage showed the front door never opening. So where does this leave us? Let's connect the dots. The tally marks, a countdown, or count up to something. The ash, physical proof of a presence that shouldn't exist. The recurring dates. October 12th isn't random. It's an anniversary. The lighthouse door, a portal? A prison? Both. Jenna and Marco published their findings online. Within hours, their site crashed. Their social media accounts were suspended for violating community guidelines. When they tried to return to Beacon Point last year, the road was blocked by fallen trees that hadn't been there the day before. But the final twist? In March 2023, a fisherman off Beacon Point's coast reeled in a message bottle. Inside was a waterlogged note. "Tell them I didn't choose this." The door opens both ways. Almost out. E.V. The handwriting matched Elias's 1987 logs. So here's the question that keeps me awake. If the tally marks are gone, the evidence erased, and the witnesses silenced, who delivered that bottle? And why now? Because sometimes the truth doesn't want to be found. It wants to be fed. And whatever's on the other side of that door, it's been starving for 36 years. The Beacon Point Lighthouse still stands. Not as a monument, not as a relic, but as a warning. Rust gnaws at its iron bones. Salt crusts its shattered windows. And yet, it's never truly empty. Locals avoid the coastal road after sundown. They'll tell you it's out of respect. But roll down your window on a fog-heavy night, and you'll hear it, the groan of the lantern room door swinging open. A sound that hasn't been possible since 1987, when the hinges rusted shut. In 2018, A couple on a midnight drive swore they saw a flicker in the tower. Not the warm gold of kerosene, but a sickly green pulse, throbbing like a bruise. They pulled over, phones raised, but the light vanished. What they captured instead was a shadow. Tall, hunched, pacing behind the cracked glass. When they zoomed in, the figure stopped, turned, and in the reflection of the broken window, they saw not their own faces, but a pair of eyes. Milky, unblinking. They deleted the video. But the next morning, their car wouldn't start. The mechanic found the engine flooded with salt water. Then there's the clockwork. In 2020, a team of engineers inspected the lighthouse for structural damage. They confirmed the gears hadn't moved in decades, seized solid by corrosion. But when one of them, a man named Luis, stayed behind to pack up tools, he heard it. Click, click, click. Rhythmic, relentless, coming from the tower. He climbed the stairs, flashlight shaking, and found the mechanism, still frozen. Yet the sound grew louder. Not from the gears, from the walls. Luis quit the next day, moved inland, refuses to speak of it. But the most chilling account comes from a teenager named Kira. Last October, she and her friends dared each other to touch the lighthouse door at midnight. As Kira pressed her palm to the wood, she felt a vibration, a deep guttural hum. Then a voice, not in her ears, in her bones. Help me reset the light. When she jerked back, her hand was blistered. Not from heat, from cold. So what's really happening here? Let's piece it together. The lighthouse was built in 1870, but the rocks it stands on? They're older, much older. Indigenous tales speak of the place where the sea breathes, a spot where the veil between worlds thins. Sailors who drifted too close reported mirages. Cities under the waves, ships with sails of smoke, and lights, so many lights. Maybe Beacon Point was never meant to guide ships. Maybe it was meant to keep something in. And Elias? He wasn't the first. 1911, Keeper Thomas Rowe logs figures in the fog begging for matches. He quit after a week, drowned in his bathtub. 1955, Keeper Maria Santos reported knocks inside the walls every 3 a.m. She vanished during a routine supply trip. 2008, a caretaker hired to guard the ruins fled after one night. He claimed the tide spoke to him, in Elias's voice. The truth is, Beacon Point Lighthouse isn't abandoned. It's occupied. Every few years, someone tries to demolish it. 1995, wrecking balls malfunction. Cranes collapse. 2011, investors planning a hotel mysteriously back out. Their CEO cited nightmares of drowning. 2022, a wildfire spared the lighthouse. Flames split around it like it was protected by something. So here's what I believe. Elias is still there. Not as a man, not as a ghost, but as a custodian. Whatever took him that night left a part of him behind. A spark to keep the gears turning, the light burning, and the door shut. But doors don't stay sealed forever. The next time you see a lighthouse, remember, they're not just warnings for us. They're warnings for them. And as long as Beacon Point stands, Elias Voss keeps his watch. But ask yourself, what happens when the last gear grinds to a stop? When the light finally dies, maybe we'll hear him scream. Or maybe we'll finally hear what's been screaming back. So here we are at the edge of the fog. Was Elias Voss a man broken by solitude? Or did he brush against something older? Something that's been waiting in the cracks of this world long before lighthouses, long before ships, long before we dared to name the dark? The answer depends on what you're willing to believe. Do you trust the Coast Guard reports? The ones that claim he hallucinated it all? Or do you side with the old fishermen? The ones who swear they've seen sails in the mist that vanish when the light hits them? Maybe you think Jenna and Marco found the truth. That Elias is trapped, fighting to reset a light that's keeping us safe from whatever clawed its way into our world that night. Or maybe you felt it. That prickle on your neck when you're alone at 2:17 a.m. The way your bedroom door creaks just a little too long. The nagging thought that isolation isn't just emptiness, it's a presence. And it's hungry. This story isn't about answers. It's about questions that refuse to die. So I'm handing it to you. Drop your theory below. Madness? Monsters? A door that shouldn't exist? This mystery belongs to all of us now. And if you're ever on Coastal Route 9 after sunset, slow down near mile marker 22. Roll down your window. Listen for the ticking that shouldn't be there. Watch for the flicker in the tower. But don't you dare pull over. This is Unsolved Mysteries and Crimes, and wherever the shadows thicken, you'll find me there. Until next time.